So, my friends, our jargon term for today is joint attention. Now, we're not talking about making sure that you put a hot pad on your knees because you have arthritis, right? That's not the kind of joint attention we're talking about. This is something that's very specific that can be very helpful to us. So let's take a look at our actual definition for joint attention. Joint attention, the process by which one alerts another to a stimulus via nonverbal means, such as gazing or pointing, okay? Not the most horrible of definitions, but I still don't know what does this have to do with my kid and how can this be helpful to me. So let's move on to our working definition here. Working definition of joint attention: the ability to share attention with another person toward an object, person, or event. Okay, so I always like to make a triangle for joint attention. This is my universal symbol for joint attention. This, to me, when I'm out and about, is one of the most fascinating things, that when I'm watching other kids and comparing what my son was like at a certain age and what these kids are like, it's just fascinating to me. So, for instance, I could be at Disneyland and you get an opportunity to people watch, right? And you see a little 2-year-old, and one day in particular, I saw this little girl who was looking at something with her mom. And they were standing in line for something, and you know, there's always stuff going by at Disneyland. And the little girl saw one of the costume characters going by, and she looked at the character, and it was exciting to her. So what did she do? She immediately turned, looked up at her mom, and pulled on her arm, and then looked back at the character. Now, mom turns and looks at the little girl and sees there's something going on, right? And then she turns to follow the little girl's gaze. Now, both of them, so they're the 2 points here, both of them are looking at the costume character, enjoying that, and then what happens? This magical, magical thing. They look back at each other for this moment of checking in. So we've created a triangle of attention there. Now, it's one of those small, little, subtle moments that it's so easy to miss the miracle of that moment. And as a parent, I didn't notice that my son wasn't doing that. I totally didn't notice it, because if somebody doesn't alert you to it, you will miss it. But that moment is the beginning building block for so many things to come later on. And if we were to put it under a heading, we would say all of the social skills that we want for our kids to have start in that moment. Because there is so much communication that's passing in that moment. Yeah, it's not verbal, and a lot of times we're focused on, well, what's the verbal thing that we want to get our kid to? And we want them to speak and all of these different things, but we also want that social component, right? And a lot of social interaction is nonverbal, and it starts with this moment. If you think about it and dissect it, what happens in that moment, the little girl's looking at the costume character and goes, that's really cool. I want to see if mom sees what's happening with it. And then they look at mom. Mom has this moment that she sees something's going on with my little girl, and the little girl looks back at the character. Mom looks at the character and goes, oh, it's the costume character. And then they turn back to each other to enjoy it together. Now, something that happens, and our therapists and our psychologists tell us that early on, our kids don't know how to react to something, and how they gauge how to react to it is off of us. So they're not born with a fear of a dog who's snarling at them, right? But because they're checking in on joint attention, and they see the dog and they're just like, oh, it's a dog. And then they look at mom looks at the dog, they look back at each other, and mom is frightened. They start to recognize that frightened face, and then they know, I need to be afraid of that thing. So if you think about it, it starts to build an awareness of the world around them and what is something to have a good reaction to, what is something that to potentially have a negative reaction to. There are all these lessons that come with it. But it is also part and parcel of that desire to check in with somebody. It's another connection. And we want to create thousands and thousands and thousands of connections that are rewarding to them. Because in this moment, in this neurotypical moment where the little girl and the mom look and they enjoy this moment and look back, there's something about it that's warm, and it's happy, and it's connected, and it's very rewarding. So the little girl is going to do more of that right up until she's a teenager, right? And then she's not going to want to do that anymore. But for a lot of years, this becomes a pipeline of learning. And if we cut that off and it doesn't happen, where does it leave our kids? So joint attention, a really crucial building block. And by the way, if we're not seeing it, guess what we can do? We can teach it. There are very specific ways that we can teach joint attention to a child, and if we do it when they're very young, then they don't miss that milestone. If we have to wait and teach it to someone when they're 5, we can. It will take longer. And then we have to go and pick up all the pieces of all the things that they didn't get because they didn't get the joint attention. Can we teach it to a 12-year-old? Yes, we can, but it takes that much longer to teach it to them and that much longer to try to catch them up on all the things they missed. So when is a good day to start teaching joint attention and making it one of the most rewarding things for an individual to participate in? Now. Right this minute. There is no age limit of when you can start working on joint attention. People do this with itty bitty little babies, and it can be as simple as having the little toy, the little rattle or whatever, rattling it in the baby's face and kind of, making it tickle them a little bit and pulling it back and having them look at you and then look at the thing and then look back at them and, oh, look, and getting them to look at it. So it's got to be something that's reinforcing to them, and make sure that you reward it so that we build those skills. Joint attention, it's a fabulous, fabulous thing.